Woohoo! So finally, the project that you were waiting for. So in this section, we're gonna create something and we're gonna understand the React Native basics. This video is all about the basics, how the Flexbox works in React Native. It's a little bit different than the web Flexbox, little bit, not much. And we will focus on what is components and how you can do all these things. Required things for the design perspective. Now, these are not the entire basics of React Native because there's a lot more to discuss about states and props and how things are passed on and all of these things. So right now, let's just launch up the things, and I'm going to launch up the XDE, which is Expo XDE, and it's not going to take much time. So there we go. And this is our Expo XDE, and we're going to create our very first project here. I hope I am signed in here. Come on, load up Expo, you can do that. So create new Expo project. There we go, it's creating the project. And we're going to call this as simply proj1, and we're going to call this as proj1, but since we are understanding the React Native basics here, I'm going to call this as proj1 native. Now this is kind of a structure that we're going to follow, proj1, proj2, so that we can keep a track of our projects. Okay, and obviously things will be available on GitHub as well. So proj1 native, and we're going to create this, and now it's going to download a few stuff from the internet. And in the meantime, I can fire up my Atom so that we can load up all the things and I can discuss some of the basics of that. Okay, there we go. So the project is being loaded, and we're going to run that initially on an iOS device because it's quicker for me. But for you, you can launch up the Expo and can launch up into your emulator or your real device. Depends on how you really want to see that. Okay, so let me just drag and drop this proj1 folder here on my Atom so that I can see all of my directory structure. And there we go, it's all ready, and we're gonna launch this up on an iOS simulator. You can launch that on Android simulator as well, no big deal. But by the end of every project, we're gonna run all the things on both the devices, Android as well as on iOS, so that you can see there is no difference in what are the devices. You can run it on multiple devices as well, no problem. Okay. Now let's open up our app.js and understand a few basic things about React Native that are super important, super compulsory, okay? So I know this looks a little bit different to you if you're just getting started with React Native without React. There is no such necessary, but React things helps. So the first rule that you have to remember, and you can even write that down, is you can return only one element. Yes, this is true, and this is rule number one. What I mean by that. Now you can see just here in the Expo default class, here you can see that what we can see is this guy here, a view. Consider this view as a division in the web development. In the web, we had a division and we can have a lot of divisions here. In this React Native, you can just return one division. You cannot have something like this guy. I have a view which returns a text and I can have another view which returns a text. This is going to give me an error, because the rule is you can only return one element. Now, in such situation where I have to return multiple things, I have to wrap this guy into another view. This is kind of a hack that you can do. It's completely valid and everybody does that. Okay, so there is no such things to be shame about. Okay, that's the rule number one. So there we go. Now it is allowed to return more than one thing. So if you want to return like text, buttons, a couple of views, scroll views, end of the day, the story should be same that you can only return one element. So technically we are returning one. This is rule number one. The rule number two says if an element is getting started, it should end. What I mean by that? Simply saying that when the view is starting, you'll always find a closing tag for that view. There is no exception with that. Otherwise, things are going to return you an error. But there is a strange situation here as well. For example, you have a view which says like something. So you're just getting started with something just like that. And yes, literally you can name your elements as something. Either you have to be a closing tag here, just like something. If I can type that correct, something just like that. This is the one way of ending the tag. Or instead of doing this, what you can do is you can have a / just like that. So there are two ways of closing the tags. Either close in a separate element or just close it inside itself. So both are allowed, okay? So this is the rule number two. You cannot skip this, okay? So this is the one thing. Okay, now let me just get rid of this. We don't need this right now, and I'm gonna just remove this as well. So there we go. Back to the basics. Okay, Now, what we will be doing throughout this is we'll be writing a lot of style sheets here, okay? And the format that we are going to follow is declaring this constant here at the bottom. This is our whole style sheet. A lot of people get worried about that, hey, in the web development, we had a practice of keeping our style sheet separately in a separate file. But here in the React Native, it's not that practice. In the React Native, every component comes up with its own CSS. And there is a rock solid reason behind that. The reason is the components are independent. You will be using your component like anything in this project, in other projects. And the whole concept is when you bring a component, it should just work just like that. And it will only work with all of these stylings and CSS if the styles are written in that file only. So that is why all the components, we just try to break everything into smaller components, and that component comes up with its own style sheet so that it can be reused. So for this purpose, you'll always see this kind of things happening. So style sheets always are written here, okay? So, and the syntax that we'll be following is style is equals to, and then in the curly braces, styles. And do remember, this is a common mistake. The first one is style, the second one is styles with an S. Styles.container, and then you can define your object here, the container, okay? So for example, if you want to call this as container instead of container, or maybe you want to add one more styling to the text, okay? So what you can do is you can simply write style equals, then curly braces, and then you can say styles dot my text, just like that, okay? Once you have that text, you can make sure the comma is there. React Native is super crazy about each and everything. Just miss one comma and it's going to give you a complete error, okay? So what you can do is you can simply write my text here, colon, and then can write all these things. It was recommended that you put a colon after that, even if there is nothing after that. And then you can define your things. Like for example, you want to change the color, you can write color and can make it something grayish. Like for example, I want to have C1, 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 just like that. So all these things you can do. So we'll be writing all the styles just like that. And the syntax is styles equal style equal styles dot my text and whatever the name is, okay? So we will be doing this. So this is the rule number 3, kind of how you do the stylings in React Native. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this right now. This is all the basics, okay? And I can get rid of that. And do remember, the style is actually kind of a prop, a short for properties, and it always is being defined inside the opening tag. In this case, the view, in this case, the text. So always it is defined in the opening tag. So this is like the basics of how the React Native structure works. And the rest of the things like import and all these things, we will be working it on later on, but the whole story is whatever you want to use, you have to first import that. For example, we are using view, we are using style sheet, and we are using text. If you want to use anything else, you have to import it. For example, if you want to import a button, you have to first say button, and it's going to say, hey, now you can use button, and then you can return a button here. So simply button, and there we go. I can have a closing button or can have a self-closing button. Oops, I forgot the slash there. There we go. So this is how things works. And inside the button, you can have a text and can write something into it. Sounds a little bit intimidating at first, but it's not. It's actually super easy. So for now, let's just get rid of that and that as well so that we can have this. This is moreover of understanding the React Native. So this is how a component is designed. In the next video, I'll explain you how you can design a separate component in a separate file and can bring that component in this view. So this is all we are going to cover in the next video. I hope you're enjoying these videos, and if you're enjoying, give it a thumbs up and do rate us as well. So that's it for this video, and let's move into the next video for more topics.